The purpose of this video is to provide guidance on how the components of the gross income definition can be assessed, including exam technique on how to approach a gross income discussion question. There are two disclaimers that students need to take note of. First, this video does not mean that these are the only ways in which gross income can be assessed. The psychocompetency framework under 1B5 of the pervasive skills personal attributes expects a future CA to be able to manage change. In other words, students need to be able to anticipate changes in the environment, for example, in how the required in an assessment is formulated, and students can assess how their work is likely to be affected by this change, and very importantly, students are open to change. The second disclaimer is that this video is prepared for students studying at the University of the Free State. Other universities might have other ways in which, for example, their marking plans are drafted. Always consult your own lecturer in the case of any uncertainties. So how can the court cases, for example, be asked? We could give you the court case name and request the principal, or vice versa. We could give you the principal and request the court case name, or link the principal to the correct component, link the principal to the correct court case name, link the correct court case name to the correct component. These are all ways in which the court cases can be asked. The court cases can also be assessed in the following way. This is just a different way to assess whether a student can link the component of the gross income definition to the applicable court case name and or principal. One of the most common ways in which gross income is assessed is by virtue of discussion questions. You have to be able to discuss whether or not an amount should be included in gross income. And in your learning material for EBAL 2708, which you can find in your study material for Unit 2, Subunit 1, you will see that we listed steps that you should follow to answer a discussion question. Now, it's firstly, list the gross income definition. Secondly, identify the problem. Number 3, list the component that relates to the problem. Number 4, list the court case applicable to the identified component, as well as the principle that was laid down by the courts. Number 5, apply the principle to the issue. And then number 6, conclude. Now, you can either use these steps, but you can also use what is known as the ZORRO method. Now, the ZORRO method is a method that was first introduced to TAC students by the Center for Teaching and Learning, and it basically gives us an easier way to remember all of these steps. So the ZORRO method uses a Z. Now, if you have a look here on the screen, we start over there with the issues, then we move over into principles, application, and conclusion. Can you see that that forms a Z or a Z? Now, how does this fit into our 6 steps for answering a gross income question? The first item in the ZORRO method is identifying the issue. Now, if we take our 6 steps, the first 3 of those steps falls into this specific quadrant. So by identifying the issue, you first need to list the gross income definition, then identify the problem. For example, is the issue whether there's an amount, whether it's capital in nature, etc., etc. And then thirdly, list the component that relates to the problem. So, if amount is the issue, then of course the component, total amount in cash or otherwise, will be the component that you list over here. Secondly, once you've identified the issue, you need to go and establish the principles that you'll need to answer. So for gross income, that means listing the court cases applicable to the identified component, as well as the principle that was laid down by the courts. So over here, we've identified the component under issue. Now we're going to identify the court case that applies to it, as well as the principle that relates to the component. Once you've done that, you move over into application. And this is very, very important. Tax is not just about theory. Tax is about taking the theory and applying it to information in the specific case study or question. So you have to take this issue that you've identified, the principles that you've identified to be able to answer or address the issue, and apply it to the information in your question. And then finally, if you go to our last quadrant, we have to conclude. Cannot emphasize enough how important it is in any type of discussion question to come to a conclusion. You can't just leave us hanging, right? You have to make a conclusion. This is what this means. Either it will be included in gross income or it won't. So let's take our 6 steps together with our ZORRO method and apply it to a case study. Now, this example was taken from the tax workbook and has been adapted for purposes of this video. You have the following information that's given to you. Jane Doe owns a furniture shop in Bloemfontein. She's a South African resident. During the 2017 year of assessment, she sold a bedroom suite to a customer for 5,000 Rand. The customer paid 4,000 Rand in cash, and Jane accepted the customer's second-hand bedroom suite as a trade-in on the balance of 1,000 Rand. 3 days later, she sold the second-hand bedroom suite to another customer for 1,500 Rand. What is required? Discuss what amounts, if any, Jane will have to include in her gross income for the 2017 year of assessment. Alternatively, ladies and gentlemen, your required could read, discuss the normal tax consequences of the above transactions for Jane's 2017 year of assessment. Remember that when we think about normal tax consequences, you are thinking about the framework for the calculation of taxable income, and that framework's first element is gross income. Now, in order to make this video helpful not only for EBAL 2708 students but also the other tax students, you'll see that I've broken up the required into the different tax codes. So if you are an EBAL 2708 student, this type of question will usually be around about 10 marks, and you will have in an assessment 15 minutes to complete it. You will note that in tax, as in most subjects within the accountancy field, 1 mark equals 1,5 minutes to complete. So if you have, for example, in this case, 10 marks, you will have 15 minutes to complete the question. If you go on to EBLS 3708 or EBAL 6808, it will also be 10 marks, 15 minutes. And finally, when you move into CTA, EBLS 6808, the same type of information, the same type of question will be 5 marks, and you will have 7.5 minutes within which to complete it. Let's have a look at how we need to address this question. So what don't you do? Dear student, you don't rush in and start writing. In order to get the most marks out of a discussion question, you need to plan your answer. And in order to plan our answer, we are going to make use of the ZORRO method. So firstly, we are going to have a look at what the issues are. So what can I see out of the information? Jane is a resident. She's taxed on worldwide income, right? Please remember to write that down because it's going to focus your brain to go in the correct direction. Now I have to remember, okay, write down the gross income definition. Gross income definition is total amount in cash or otherwise received by or accrued to during the year of assessment, not of a capital nature. Okay, so what's the problem? Jane receives cash plus a second-hand bedroom suite as consideration for the sale of the bedroom suite that she sold to the customer. So the issue is, what amount am I going to be included in gross income? So what is the component that relates to the issue? Total amount in cash or otherwise. Please make sure that you also don't forget about Section 102 of the Tax Administration Act. Remember that the burden of proof always rests upon the taxpayer. Now that we've identified the issue, we can think about the principles that we'll be using to answer this. And the principles, the court cases attached to amount in cash or otherwise, is of course Butcher Brothers and Lateghan. Please remember that we also have Primeria when we talk about amount, but that the principle of Primeria is specific to the type of circumstances that was specific to that court case. So we're not going to use that every single time. Next, we are going to apply. So when you do this question, when you write down your solution, you will take all these principles and problems that you've identified and you will apply it to the information in the question. And then finally, dear student, do not forget to come to a conclusion. So let's have a look what the memo looks like. Okay, so before we get to the solution, I need you to have a look on the right hand side of the screen. You'll see that I've set out the mark allocation for EBAL 2708. These are for my students that I'm busy compiling this video for, but I've also given you an indication of what the mark allocations will be for EBLS 3708 and EBAL 6808, that's BAc third year and BCom Honours, as well as the mark allocation for CTA EBLS 6808. It is crucial, before we get to the actual solution, if you are in your second and third year, to show your reasoning process, i.e. write down how you get to the answer instead of just giving the answer. You have to show the examiner your thought process for getting to the answer. And that is why, for example, in gross income questions, if we take those as an example, you'll always start off by dealing with residency. Because if somebody is a South African resident, they'll be taxed on worldwide income. And if you write that sentence down, it forces your brain to think in the right direction. If somebody is, for example, not a resident, then they're not taxed on worldwide income in South Africa. They're only taxed on South African source. Again, by writing that down, it forces your brain to go in a specific direction. So let's have a look at the solution for this case study. You will write down that Jane is a South African resident and she will be taxed on worldwide income. As part of part 1 or step 1 of your solution, you need to write down the gross income definition. Gross income is defined as the total amount in cash or otherwise received by a recruiter during a year of assessment, not of a capital nature. The issue that you've already identified when you planned your answer in this example with this case study is what amount needs to be included in gross income. Because remember, Jane received two types of consideration. She received cash and then she received the bedroom suite also as consideration. Now, take note that because these amounts were received during the 2017 year of assessment, and Jane owns a furniture shop, so her intention with buying and selling furniture is speculative in nature, capital in nature, and received by recruiter is not our issue. So, I've written down my gross income definition, I've identified what the problem is. Now I need to start taking the principles, my court cases, and applying them to the information. The definition of gross income includes amounts that have been received by a recruiter or person in cash and in a form other in cash, provided that it has monetary value. And the court case that I'll be using as support here is Lateghan. The burden of proof in respect of the value of the amount rests upon SARS in terms of Butcher Brothers. Remember, the Butcher Brothers case said SARS has to determine the amount. If the taxpayer does not agree with the amount that's determined by SARS, the burden of proof of what the amount should be then rests upon the taxpayer in terms of Section 102 of the Tax Administration Act. Now again, you're applying the information in the question, so you'll say Jane then has the burden of proof in terms of Section 102 of the Tax Administration Act. And again, top tip, always deal with Section 102 of the Tax Administration Act in a discussion question. So, what did Jane receive? She received 4,000 Rand in cash. That one's very straightforward. The amount will be included in her gross income. The second-hand bedroom suite has monetary value as it can be turned into cash. So what are we going to be including in gross income in terms of this bedroom suite that was given to her? The market value of 1,500 Rand. If you don't know why we use the market value of 1,500 Rand, please refer back to your textbook and have a look at the principles that is outlined for barter transactions. Okay, so we've identified the issue, we have dealt with the principles, we've applied the information, and now we need to come to a conclusion. So what is our conclusion? Jane needs to include a total of 5,500 Rand, the 4,000 Rand cash, and 1,500 Rand market value of the bedroom suite in her gross income. Not difficult, hey? So if you have a look at the mark allocation for the EBAL 2708 students, there's a total number of marks available of 13, limited to a maximum of 10. For EBLS 3708 or EBAL 6808, that available number of marks goes down to 11, again limited to a max of 10. And in CTA, you'll have total available marks of 6, limited to a maximum of 5. Please just remember, if you're a CTA student that is watching this video, in CTA, how much you write will depend on the number of marks of the specific case study or question. So now that you know what to do with the discussion question, what would your answer look like if the required was not discuss, but calculate? For example, calculate the effect of the above transactions on Jane Doe's taxable income for the 2017 year of assessment, or calculate the normal tax consequences of the above transactions for Jane Doe's 2017 year of assessment. Well, this one is really easy. Remember, when you're dealing with gross income, normal tax, taxable income, you're dealing with the framework for the calculation of taxable income. So I will have a column for my amounts, and I will have a column for my reasons and line items. So in gross income, I'll include the sale of the bedroom suite because it was cash received of 4,000 Rand. The sale of the bedroom suite, the market value in terms of Lata Khan of the 1,500 Rand, and that's going to give me a total of 5,500 Rand included into gross income. Please remember, and this is a top tip, even if the required does not ask you to give reasons, always support your calculation with a reason. Right, you'll see I have an alternative here at the bottom. This simply means if you don't want to split out these two, the cash and the market value into two separate line items, you can combine them, right? So you'll get a mark for the 4,000 and a mark for the 1,500, provided that your reasons and your total is still correct. This concludes the video on dealing with gross income assessments and how it can be asked, specifically relating to the components. I hope this video is of value. If you have any questions or comments, if you're an EBAL 2708 student, please contact me, Lizelle, at probaal@ufs.ac.za. If you are a BAC third year or BCom honors student, please contact Annelies or Maurice. And then if you're a CTA student, you can always contact Prof. Kukumur. Best of luck with the studies, and remember, study hard.